Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on our third session of Let's Talk Accessibility. We've got our opening session is being presented to you even by Jane Cole, CPT President and also MD at Blackpool Transport. So Jane, if I could pass to you and you can open today's session, please.
Thank you very much, Dawn, and welcome everybody to this afternoon session on Let's Talk Accessibility. So I'm Jane, President of the CPT and Managing Director for Blackpool Transport, and I'm fully committed to working with government to ensure that we get behind the Bus Enhanced Partnership Scheme. We must continue to learn more about accessibility barriers and do more to address them. We have a unique opportunity to discuss what we'd like to see in the bus service improvement plans, the BSIPs, and all feedback is welcome at this critical stage in the consultation process. Over the sessions this week, we had started those conversations between bus operators, local authorities, and bus users about what the public would like to see put in place to begin to remove more barriers for disabled people. The presentations you will see today will tell you more about what customers are experiencing, what operators are already doing, and how we can influence how our bus services of the future may operate. The bus industry is experiencing an acute staff shortage of PSV drivers at the moment, which may become a longer-term problem. As this is a boarding point of our journey, I hope we can seek to implement some changes as we go along and not wait until the end, particularly around communication at times of short-term planning and things that might be contributed to driver shortages. It's at times of change and disruption that disabled people can be at their most vulnerable. So for me, the number one BSIP must be around improved communication. I'm delighted that so many people have joined the sessions over the last few days, and I hope that you will participate fully in the session today. To start the session, we now have two videos, one from Brighton and Hove Bus, and the other one is from the Chief Executive of the CPC, Graham Vidler. Please enjoy today's session.
Hello, I'm Graham Vidler, Chief Executive of the Confederation of Passenger Transport. I want every journey to be accessible to everybody all of the time. That's a fundamental part of the bus and coach industry's appeal. It's really important to us as an industry. And of course, it's critical to the people who depend on our services. Particularly true, I think, of disabled people, for whom bus is even more important than it is for the non-disabled population. 7% of journeys by disabled people are made by bus, compared with 5% for the population in general. So it's really pleasing to see Bus Users UK and Disability Rights UK coming together to shine a light on the important question of how can we continue to make accessibility improvements for the disabled population in particular. And there's lots of good practice out there already going on across the sector, and among my members I see examples of vastly improved audio-visual displays on board. I see drivers and other staff going out on immersion sessions, spending a period of time in the shoes of blind and partially sighted people so they can understand the practical problems that they face on a day-to-day basis. I see lots of mental health initiatives going on so that the bus is presented to people as a safe and welcoming environment for them to travel on. So lots of good things out there. But to my mind, we can always do more. We can always improve our customer experience. And I think now's a really good time to be focusing on this question. After all, every local transport authority in the country, every bus operator in the country is looking now through these bus service improvement plans at how we can make bus services much better for everybody in society. Really good opportunity, I think, to put the needs of disabled people foursquare in the middle of that consideration, and I'm really pleased that this week's series of events are a great chance to doing that. I look forward to hearing some of the ideas and suggestions that come out of this process. Thank you very much indeed.
Go ahead. We want everybody to feel comfortable using our bus services. Last year, Brighton, Hove and Metrobus achieved the leader status in the Department for Transport's Inclusive Transport Leaders Scheme. And across Go Ahead, we're proud of all of our local initiatives to make travelling by bus more accessible. These include initiatives like the Helping Hand card, which helps people to indicate to the driver the sort of assistance they may need. And this has been rolled out nationally and even as far as Singapore. Go Ahead has been training drivers as dementia friends, and we've been installing dementia-friendly floorboards in our new buses. We're also looking to support customers with autism and many other initiatives to advance accessibility. The Go Ahead group needs to look inwardly too. We need to look at our colleagues that we work with, and whether that's about becoming disability confident employers, or whether it's about the networks that are being created to support inclusive and diverse workforces, we need to keep moving forward. Go Ahead's accessibility journey and our route to inclusivity is never over. We need to keep listening, we need to learn from others, and we need to ensure that every journey is taken care of.
Dawn, are you able to unmute yourself?
No,
Oh, yes, you are.
I can hear you now.
you can hear me now. Apologies.
Thank you.
So yeah, as I was saying, really great to have that opening from Jane Cole at Blackpool Transport, and the support from Graham Vidler and Go Ahead. I know we have a lot of operators on the call today, so it's really nice to see that a lot of you are forward thinking and trying to do more and more for your customers as they board their buses. So the next speaker we have is Cameron from Disability Rights UK. So Cameron, if you could turn your camera and mic on, and we'll let you go.
Thanks, Dawn. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us here and letting us speak. You would have had our head of policy, Fazile, join you, who I know was in the other two sessions, but she's not able to make it today, so I'm stepping in for her. So I just wanted to start off really about kind of the whole thing around taking this opportunity that presents itself. And really what the last year, particularly through the pandemic, highlighted for us as an organization, it highlighted the kind of significant systemic inequalities that disabled people experience. And we just kind of, when we look back on the events that happened, we just saw that both public and private sector businesses over a broad range of organizations and businesses kind of let disabled people down. Inclusion was just not baked into plans, into initiatives that were being put in place. It was always an afterthought, and that was kind of incredibly difficult to watch, because we are 26 years, well, more than that. 1995 was when the Disability Discrimination Act came in, and in 2010 the Equality Act replaced that piece of legislation. And we still find that the inequality exists for disabled people. But we've got an opportunity now, I believe, to use the government's words to kind of build back better. And the disability strategy is a piece of document that was released this year. And it's the government's strategy about how the inequalities that disabled people face are going to be addressed. The government talks about levelling up, this levelling up agenda, and wanting to focus on kind of socioeconomic issues, which are effectively poverty and geography of where people live. So I think it's important to remember who are these people that we talk about when we talk about people who fit under that category of poverty, geography, the socioeconomic issues. And when you look at the data, these people are disabled people. These are people from BME backgrounds. These are women, and so on. So these are the people that we're talking about. And unlike many of the protected characteristics, disability is one that cuts across all of the other protected characteristics. Disability is something that can happen to any one of us at any point in our lives. There are 14 million people who live in poverty. 7 million of those, so 50% of those people who live in poverty, are either disabled people or families or homes that have a disabled person living in them. So this is a big population. And The government has committed to spend in the disability strategy. They talk about spending a further £1.5 million during 2021, so the year we're in, and that the funding will be available to bus operators across the UK. They talk about reviewing the public services vehicle accessibility regulation standards. The Department for Transport talks about 99% are built to correct standards, but I would kind of push us further to say, are those standards fit for purpose today? The standards were built a number of years ago, and therefore we believe it not only, it's time to review, but actually also time to review, make sure that the way disabled people want to travel today is taken into account. The government talk about they're going to start doing some research in 2022, research into bus stops, bus stations next year, and introduce regulations and audio and visual announcements next year as well. So there's an opportunity provided, and it's already been mentioned, by the bus strategy and bus service improvement plans. And I guess what I would say to everybody here today is the one really important point is that you embed inclusion at the heart of all your thinking, of all your planning and everything that you do. And you understand and embed the social model of disability, which is very simply says, what are the barriers that disabled people experience in bus travel? And when we think about travel, we must think about the complete journey. It's not just the point that you're getting onto and off a bus, but it's all of the bits that lead up to it, finding out about timetabling, bus stops, and so on. So it's the complete journey that's really important, the intersection bits of when you change mode of transport from buses onto another form of transport. And so kind of who are we? Who disabled people, who are we? So we are part of your community. We're part of your family, your neighbors, in your workplace. We're down the high streets. We're kind of everywhere. In the UK, we have an estimated 14 million disabled people. 45% of older people would be disabled people, even though quite often older people do not talk about themselves as disabled people, but just through the aging process, many of the barriers that they experience are the same that when we talk about disabled people. 19% of working age people are also disabled people who rely on transport to get from home to work, even in today's idea of kind of hybrid working. 8% of children and young people are disabled people. And so that really means not only does it affect young people and children, but their families, because they will travel together quite often. Wide range of impairments. So disability is a very broad church, and which is why we often talk about barriers that people experience rather than the specific impairments that someone may have. Within our community, there's high levels of poverty, as I've already mentioned, and just systemic exclusion that and inequality that exist, which excludes us from everyday life. Disabled people are more likely to rely on public transport, buses, as a means of travel, as a means of living independently, shopping, medical appointments, socializing, getting to work. Will use public transport to a greater aspect of their lives. So when we think about priorities for change, I guess what I would leave you with is a few points to think about. Concepts of co-production and engagement. So putting the voice and the lived experience of disabled people at the heart of your organization, at the heart of your business, because if you get things right with disabled people, you will get them right for pretty much everybody else. When you're planning for future and solving problems, make sure that you work with disabled people. Again, bring disabled people's lived experience at the heart of solving some of those problems and issues. Provide opportunities for engagement. And engagement is more than consultation. It's kind of ongoing dialogue that you have with your clients, customers, disabled people, your community that you operate in, making sure that you're listening all the time and putting what you hear into action and feeding back. Making sure that disabled people have the opportunity to provide, have a positive experience when they want to give you feedback or have a complaint when things went wrong. Too often we hear about disabled people making a complaint, but then saying that they never heard back of what happened to that. it kind of doesn't give people the confidence, therefore, that anything's going to be done about it if they can't see what happened to the complaint that they made. Just remembering that, looking at the whole journey, as I said earlier, it's not just about that point when you're getting onto the bus itself, it's the whole thing. It's the way information is provided, it's the concessions that you might offer, looking at the location of bus stops and the comfort of bus stops. So not expecting that everybody will be able to stand and wait for a bus, just being mindful of those things. Stepping on and off a bus, how the pavement and the ramp system may and not work. Making sure that when somebody's on the bus that they are comfortable in how they get to the seat and are sat down and are safe before the bus kind of carries on. And often people and companies will say to us, you know, we've got technological innovations that are going to help, and that's great. Technology does support, but I would really urge not to lose that human element, that human contact. And I guess on the buses, it's your drivers. They are your point of contact with customers who are using your services. And we believe that bus drivers must have kind of customer care as part of their job role, and should almost be a priority above the kind of the driving the bus, because yes, they're going to be a bus driver, so you expect them to be able to drive and learn to drive and make sure they can operate the bus safely. But the customer care element is really important, because they are your interface between that customer's barriers and the ability of that bus driver to make a journey a good one, a positive experience, to a negative experience. So I'm going to leave you with that thought, is that remembering that the really important role that the bus drivers can play. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. And if you could just turn your mic and camera off again for us, brilliant. Some really interesting insights there, and something that bus users is constantly talking about is that if we address one disability or accessibility problem, we're making it better for everybody. So a key ask there for local transport authorities and operators to consider when they're making those changes. So next up we have Shane from Blackpool Transport talking about the work that they've been doing on accessibility. Shane?
Thank you, Dawn. Hi, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here. I'm stepping in for Karen today, our head of stakeholders. I'm the marketing and commercial manager here at Blackpool Transport. I'm going to talk you through as briefly as I can around our journey of accessibility, probably over the last 5 years or so, really. Which I guess, just to set the scene a little bit, historically, we'll be open and honest, we were quite poor at customer engagement. Our focus was probably heavily on operational and technical aspects of delivery. And what happened was a complaint really changed the landscape of our focus a few years ago. Rather than simply brush them under the carpet, we had probably quite a scathing complaint from a user with a disability. But we took that opportunity to invite them in and really understand what had happened, why it had happened, and what that journey looks like for that customer. That led to us being able to invite a series of different people with, whether that was physical or hidden non-visible disabilities, into our driver CPC sessions, which will really had a profound impact. Rather than us delivering training just direct, our drivers had the opportunity to engage with people with disabilities and really understand the end-to-end journey that they experience, and sometimes the additional support or needs that these customers have. And what we saw was that drivers really started to talk about the challenges that they face. You know, sometimes there's an opportunity to shy away from difficult situations, and it really gave them the opportunity to understand the additional requirements of every customer, not just somebody with a disability, but everybody. And that led to then a renewed focus on our customer and our colleagues. So we upped our game, is the shortest way to say it. We introduced the dedicated customer experience team. They're based now at our main sort of driver canteen area, so they're really embedded with the day-to-day challenges that our drivers experience and face. We combined that with really interrogating and getting into the detail of the complaints that we received. It was no longer a case of simply appeasing a customer, whether that was through a refund or a nice reply. We wanted to understand the end-to-end experience, what caused it, what were the themes, what were the trends, and how could we implement that into our proactive training to be preventative rather than just reactive. We gained detailed feedback from different communities and user groups. I've heard many groups called hard to reach, and really they're only hard to reach if you don't try hard enough. So we really embedded ourselves within our communities, and they're always more than willing to talk to you. So it isn't always as challenging as people might think to really get embedded with the real people that actually use our services. So we tried to engage with as many people as we could. We upped our game in supporting independent travel, and we took every opportunity that we can to attend events, meetings, and really understand what the landscape looks like for every customer, not just those with a disability. So I guess, the next question is, well, so what happened? What was the outcome? Well, that rich insight, like I said before, was then embedded into our frontline training. So we were delivering training that was real, it was in the moment, and it was impactful. Drivers could better sympathise with those who had additional requirements, and they could better understand them. And actually, it's often a case that you don't need to know about every disability or every extra requirement that a person might need. You just need to be confident in how you approach that and simply asking a customer, how can I help you today? And not shying away from those instances where historically it can seem that the driver's then disinterested, but perhaps often we found that they were just too scared to ask the right questions. We also said sorry to customers if we got things wrong. We were very open and honest about that. But we also said sorry to our drivers. So by the nature of being able to really investigate our complaints, we understood where actually drivers hadn't done wrong, and in the past it might have seemed that way. So that really got buy-in from our frontline teams as well. We managed to drive complaints to an all-time low, which has a number of benefits. I don't think I need to go through them. And we saw a shift, and we got plenty more compliments coming through as well. Obviously, there's an increase in reputation and brand if we're receiving more compliments and we're handling complaints better. But certainly internally, morale at the time was at an all-time high because, again, we had better engaged drivers who were better equipped with the softer skills to attend to the needs of everybody. Where we're at now, we feel we've got colleagues that are completely immersed in the customer journey from end to end. As Cameron was saying before, they're not simply a driver who drives a vehicle. Once they're trained on those technical skills, that's fantastic. But then it's really about how do they become customer service agents? How are they able to remedy everything end to end that takes place on that journey for a customer? We've received recognition for the disability awareness training that we've been delivering. And being mentally healthy is a module in all of our driver CPC training that covers both customer awareness and also the employee well-being of our teams as well. We soon realised that actually if we're expecting and needing our teams to better look after the well-being of our customers, then we also need to do the same for our customers as well, which is our team members. And that's been extremely well received as well. We rolled out Dementia Friends training a few years ago, and our teams were so proud to just display that Dementia Friends badge because it meant something to them, and it's a recognised acknowledgement as well amongst customers who need that extra support. And again, training wasn't just a delivered module through PowerPoint. It was based on real experience and things that are actually happening out there. So it was much more immersive, much more engaging, and much better received. So what we'd say to other operators or anybody really looking at taking away something like this is it doesn't cost a lot. In fact, almost next to nothing. It costs the time of some generous people, and it cost our time in wanting to embed it. But it was lived, and it wasn't a module off a shelf that we paid thousands of pounds for. It was really, really low cost. It was based on people helping other people. Like I said before, communities want to help. Once you open those doors, you might have to manage the amount of engagement that you get, but really once you do open them, the insight is far richer than anything that you probably have access to otherwise. It takes some bravery, I guess, to step out of a comfort zone, but once you seek help, again, people are more than willing to engage, and they'll tell you their honest feelings and stories, which you can then learn from and act on. I mentioned about complaints already, but I probably can't stress that aspect enough. Understand your complaints, themes and trends. We really try to use that to limit contact where a customer is contacting us repeatedly with either the same issue or the same query. Let's learn from it. Let's proactively change our communications or our approach so that we can empower customers with these answers before it goes wrong or before it's too late. It goes without saying that you need to look after your people and they'll look after your customers. And we really found that by empowering them with the skills that go beyond the technical aspects, being better able to deliver your job that you do day to day is extremely rewarding and empowering, and that leads to high productivity. And our induction has been overhauled as well. So it now includes equality and diversity training, customer experience excellence, and like I said before, being mentally healthy, amongst others. But we're not stopping there, not at all. So we're working on wraparound training of organisational development. So like I said, the softer skills, the skills that go beyond just driving a vehicle from A to B, but the skills that we know absolutely enhance that role of a frontline employee. We're developing a suite of real skills training that everybody can have access to, whether that's modular or whether that's suited to individual needs, but that will be accessible to every staff member. We're working more closely on our leadership development. We're now working with the Institute of Customer Service to really up our game in how we, I guess, improve understanding across the organisation of the importance of customer service and how trust, amongst other things, probably plays one of the most vital roles in that. And once trust is destroyed, it's very, very hard to get back. We have a successful appraisal and one-to-one scheme now, which in most organisations is extremely standard, but I think in the bus industry is often a challenge. We're working with lone workers in the hundreds or even the thousands, but being able to implement a system where we ensure frontline team members get that one-to-one contact on a periodic basis really allows us to align to our staff and align closer to our customers. Our teams are more empowered out on the network, so I've probably said it enough, but they're not simply bus drivers. They are customer service excellence ambassadors. In Blackpool particularly, they're ambassadors for the resort. And I guess the more that our staff members got up their sleeve, the better they are able to adapt to almost any situation. And ultimately, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but it's also going to lead to positive journey experiences, positive word of mouth, and hopefully more customers. So I'll leave it there. I think I've maybe gone over a tiny bit, but more than happy to answer any questions at any point. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Shane. That was really, really useful and really insightful. And I love the notion of that disabled people aren't hard to find. They're not hiding somewhere ready to jump out on us and tell us what they need. We just need to co-produce and talk to them. So next we go to Victoria Garcia from Brighton and Hove, and she'll give you some more experiences of what they're doing down there.
Hi. Are we ready for the slides? Hi, everybody. Whilst we're waiting for the slides, I will just introduce myself. So I'm Victoria Garcia from Brighton Hove Buses, and I'm the Accessibility and Communities Manager. And in fact, my colleague, who's Head of Customer Experience, Luke Taylor, he'll be telling you something, just a little couple of things after I've spoken. Do we have access to the slides, Dawn, at all?
Laurie's now doing it for you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you. So I'm Victoria Garcia, and I'm going to talk to you about the key ingredients to our 3-tier philosophy about how we've done what we've done and why we do it. And I think that Shane's actually given us a great insight to everything that's happened in Blackpool buses. And in fact, I did put into chat a document at the beginning that shares with you quite a few of the things that we've been doing. So it might be of interest to some people to see that document. And I'm just going to pop in a video for you to watch later called Shirley's Journey. It'll be very interesting, I think, for you to maybe watch that video around the Dementia Friends programme. So I got my role, I started my role 7 years ago as being, I was running customer services at that point, and I was asked by the managing director and also Luke as well, if I would actually work in the accessibility department. I'm a prime example of somebody with a non-physical disability after a brain injury 17 years ago, and I've also got other conditions. I've got autoimmune disease and I've got a sudden death syndrome as well. And I get regular seizures, and for 5 years I couldn't work at all because of the fact that I was having such regular seizures. So when I actually came back into the workplace, my first job back into the workplace being Brighton Hove Buses, I had to learn to travel again, to be confident about travelling on the bus, on the train. I had to learn to cross over the road and buy my own pint of milk, because for 5 years I was totally under full-time care with full-time carers. So that's the story behind how I became involved. But if you go on to the next slide, please. So as was mentioned earlier by Carmen, it's actually the Inclusive Transport Strategy came out in 2018, the Bus Back Better. And within that, there's the leader status. And I will just mention, we have got the highest accreditation for the leader status, but that isn't something for us to really shout about and say, hey, we've done it, because we haven't. Because it's really key to keep listening and keep learning. And actually, that's one of the things that we do. And I would recommend that within what I'm going to speak to you at the moment, it's about listening, it's about learning, to be able to implement all the positive changes that can be done to make accessible travel more accessible. And if you go on to the next slide, please. So going back to what was said earlier, what's it about? It's all about people. It's all about everybody. It comes down to people. It's not just about customers, future customers, it's about colleagues as well. So as Martin was saying in his video earlier, acting for Go Ahead, but of course he's MD of Brighton Hove Buses and Metro Bus, it's actually about being disability confident as well, and about ensuring if you look after your colleagues, as Shane was saying as well, if you look after your staff, if you look after the mental health of their well-being as well, they're actually going to go out and they're going to be representing your company, and they're going to be more focused on the fact of being helping other people. So everything is about people, and what we do is predominantly about people. And next slide, please. So one of the things that we learned when we came into this 7 years ago, I was asked to look at the fact we had very serious complaints like Blackpool did. We had some very, very serious complaints that needed addressing, and they were generally around the fact of passengers with sight loss, wheelchair users, scooter users. And they were complaints that mainly, I think, because we didn't know what to do. And that's part of the problem. We're not the experts. The real experts is the lived experience of disabled people. And at that time, we obviously weren't engaging in the right way. Of course, we were engaging. We were getting surveys undertaken. We were talking to different people, other operators, councils. But actually, we weren't really reaching out in the right way to the disabled people within the community. But we recognised very, very quickly that actually accessibility is not just about, as we said earlier, about disabled people. If you get it right for disabled people, you get it right for everyone, because every one of us will have an accessibility requirement at some point, whether somebody's broken their leg, broken their arm, they've got a short-term injury, or they've just had an operation or cesarean section, or travelling with children, luggage. All of these things are an accessibility requirement, and design of buses, everything comes around that. Next slide, please. So what is our three-tier philosophy? Very, very simple. Number one, it's about director and senior management buy-in, because they're the ones that decide on the budget. So a prime example for that is all of our senior directors, all of our managers do the same training as frontline staff, because if they understand, they're more likely to invest everywhere else. Very simple example, our managing director in 2017, at the same time as Luke, undertook the My Guide, level 1 My Guide sighted training with guide dogs. On that day, we had a commitment that within 3 years, we were actually going to be 100% audio-visual buses within 3 years by 2020. Martin made a commitment that day because he had more understanding. We're going to be 100% within 12 months, and we delivered in 10 months. And he moved all the budgets around to do that because he understood. So the second part of that three-tier philosophy is to have a dedicated accessibility person. Not every operator can afford to have somebody like myself as a manager. I've got a colleague, Sam Hart, who's also, she's an officer, accessibility officer, and we've got champions right across the business, in engineering and customer services, in finance, accessibility champions everywhere that are inputting it throughout the business. But it could be somebody that's representative within customer services or representative within operations. And thirdly, most importantly, putting those two things together is the listening and learning and implementing change from the lived experience of disabled people, working with the real experts. So we engage with multiple organisations nationally and locally. And in fact, it's not just about engagement that we've done, we continue to engage because that's what's really important. That goes into our vehicle design, our policy and processes, our marketing communications, as rightly was said earlier as well by Jane, colleague training, and of course, finally, the way we consult with disabled people. So of course, all that had to change because we weren't consulting in the right way. And just one thing I'd like to add to that, just an example on vehicle design, we don't do minimal specs on our buses. We actually don't go for the minimal specs in the wheelchair bay, in the area for when you're going through on the gangway. And in fact, one of the reasons for that is because we have a responsibility. Any bus that comes off the manufacturer's line today will be travelling around somewhere in the UK as that bus is cascaded down to another company. And with the ageing population, with the fact that more and more people will be living with an accessibility requirement, we have a responsibility to make sure the buses today are fully accessible because it costs more money to retrofit a bus. We all know that. So let's get it right today. Let's get everything on the buses how it should be. And next slide, please. So just leave you with three things before Luke just wants to mention a couple of things as well. Three key messages. Be prepared to commit to the changes required. It's culture change and it comes from top down. It will only happen if your directors, senior managers get it because they're the ones with the budgets. They're the ones that can really implement the change. Invest in your people, invest in an accessibility lead, invest in, and Luke is going to give you a couple of reasons why that's so important as well, because they'll champion the business and listen and learn from the lived experiences and ask for help. Because there's lots of people out there that are willing to help, and there's lots of organisations out there that have the answers that we don't have. We're experts at scheduling buses. We're experts at driving buses. The real experts are the lived experience of disabled people. I'm just going to pass you over to Luke very briefly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. I'm just conscious that we have a very limited amount of time today, but if we could just move to the next slide, that'd be appreciated. I could talk for hours on this subject. I have probably about 1 or 2 minutes to cover off a few highlights, so I'm going to give you some very high-level thoughts around why it's commercially viable to be accessible. But if anyone wants to talk to me more about finer details of that, then feel free to reach out and get in touch, and I'll be happy to help with that. But just to cover off in one slide, the simple fact of the matter is if you make your buses more accessible, it is commercially viable. We have found that quicker boarding and lighting times make a huge difference to our operating costs, and there are far too many examples to cover off, so let me just give you a couple. One that is very close to my heart, as my father-in-law is living with quite advanced Alzheimer's now, is that we have dementia flooring on all our buses. So it simply means use lighter coloured flooring. Dark flooring for someone with dementia is like falling down a black hole. And imagine how apprehensive someone will be about boarding if they think that they will drop down a black hole. They'll be pondering about whether to get on or not, which will hold your bus up, and that costs money. So with dementia-friendly flooring, a passenger can board your bus confidently without that apprehension. Victoria has shared in the chat a link to Shirley's journey. I really highly recommend that you spend some time watching that video. It's only a few minutes of your time, but it will tell you a lot more about how as operators we can help someone who is living with dementia. Another quick example is that we've gone back to using manual ramps rather than electric ones. This makes it easier for wheelchair and scooter users to board. We all know that electric ramps can fail, but also they don't deploy properly all the time, and they can bounce back and forth off a curb. And how awkward would that make boarding a bus for a wheelchair or a scooter user? So all of these measures take time off a journey, and remember that a quicker journey is better for the customer, for the people. And talking about people, there are other reasons why making buses accessible is critical. Firstly, you can delight your customers, and the more you delight them, the more likely they are to continue using your services. Again, Victoria mentioned a document that she shared in the chat, but I'd recommend having a quick look at that as well. There's lots of facts and figures in there, but the most important one in terms of commercial viability is on page 2, which says that up to 75% of disabled people will walk away from business if they don't believe it's accessible or not. But you can also attract new customers when they hear that you are more accessible and inclusive, as they are more confident in being able to travel easily. The community become your voice, promoting your brand, which is cheaper than expensive marketing campaigns. And the staff become your voice as well, because they're working for a company that they're proud of. And all this is important because it helps increase income into businesses by giving everyone the ability to access it. And having equal access is not a privilege, it's a right. So you heard earlier from our marketing managing director, Martin, on his opening video that we're on a constant journey and always looking for new things to do. So I'm really pleased to be able to share a new service that we're going to be launching very shortly. If we could just skip to the next slide. Within the next few weeks, we'll be launching a virtual bus 360, which is an online tool to provide people that wish to use online services with access to real buses within a virtual world. So you'll be able to get on the bus, explore all the onboard features and facilities, and access videos from real life colleagues and passengers around how to use the bus. Now, this is really important. We recognise that it won't be for everyone. Not everyone can access technology, and I fully agree with some of the comments that I've been seeing in the chat so far in the session. So we will continue to offer face-to-face familiarisation for anyone that needs that. But this tool does give people the choice to find out about their bus before setting out to a bus stop if technology is their preferred channel to do so. So to bring this to a close, I hope you found what myself and Victoria have had to say interesting. But if you do have any questions or you want to dig a bit deeper into some of what we said, then we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to get in touch. But for now, I'll hand back to Dawn to move us on to the next session.
Thank you, Victoria, and to you, Luke. I just love the fact that you're operators that are really forward thinking and trying to find new ways to remove barriers, and it's just great to hear that operators are really invested in doing that as well, and there's a commercial reason for doing it. And I particularly like the kind of top down notion and making sure you have your accessibility champions, because I'm sure others on the call will know the importance of getting that top management back up and investment into these things. So moving on, we now have Robert Johnson from the Department of Transport to talk about the BSIPs and how they can fit in with accessibility. Thank you, Robert.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Robert Johnson. I lead on local transport accessibility at the Department for Transport. In a moment, I'm going to talk a little bit about where accessibility fits with bus service improvement plans. But hopefully my colleague Michael Evans is on the call and can give you a bit of an introduction to BSIPs and the bus strategy first. Are you there, Michael?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert, and thanks to all for inviting me to speak today. So we've heard about bus service improvement plans from Jane, Graham and others. So I guess I should really start with mentioning the bus strategy, because that's really where the concept of bus service improvement plans were born. So the National Bus Strategy sets out the government's vision for bus services across England. It's backed by £3 billion of new money during the current Parliament. And we are determined through the strategy to ensure that bus services are available to everyone, everywhere. Our aim through the strategy is to increase patronage, so to improve services for passengers and attract non-bus users, but also current bus users to the bus. They certainly should be accessible, very important. They should also be frequent, more reliable, better coordinated and cheaper as well. So moving on to bus service improvement plans. So I'm pleased to say that all English local transport authorities outside London are developing their BSIPs in collaboration, of course, with their local bus operators. It's very important to mention that. And these BSIPs should really set out local visions for improving bus services, driven importantly by what passengers and would-be passengers want. And these plans should be delivered by the 31st of October. So it's mandatory, and we've set out quite clearly that these plans should seek and report the views of passengers and third parties, and both the strategy and our following guidance on bus service improvement plans say that, you know, disabled people and those with protected characteristics must be able to use the bus as easily as other passengers, and so we want to see measures taken that make buses more accessible. So not just the vehicles themselves, but supporting infrastructure such as bus stops, bus stations, and also you know, we want to see excellent customer service as well. I think Cameron mentioned earlier in the call about, you know, sort of a means of redress and ensuring that passengers can feed back to their local authorities and bus operators. Well, the BSIP asks local authorities to commit to developing a bus passenger charter that sets out what passengers can expect from their operators delivering local bus services. And we've been quite clear that these charters should include commitments on the accessibility of bus services as well. So in terms of mechanisms for redress, I think that's something that, you know, the Department for Transport will be considering. You know, how will we ensure that these standards are met nationwide? And it's something that I think we'll look to consult on in the near future. But for now, I'd like to pass on to my colleague, Robert Johnson, who is Head of Accessibility for Local Transport, to talk about what he's doing in his area, if I may.
Thanks very much for that, Michael. That's really helpful. So Michael talked a little bit there about the background to the bus strategy and what it seeks to achieve. And what's really at the core of the bus strategy is providing bus services that work for people. And clearly within that, as people who rely on bus services more than most, it's absolutely vitally important that they work for disabled people. And the bus strategy really does put accessibility at the heart of our thinking on buses. I'll give you a few quick examples. One is where government is helping to fund new zero-emission buses. We've set a requirement that those vehicles need to not just meet minimum accessibility standards, they need to exceed them. They need to provide additional space to relieve pressure on the wheelchair space, and they need to have audible and visible information on board them. We really want to lead the way in showing how making services accessible is not just about minimum requirements, it's about providing a service that people really want to use. I liked, I think it was Victoria's phrase about wanting to delight the customer. We also have committed to a consultation by the end of the year on regulatory amendments to try and support access to the wheelchair space and priority seating for people who use it, and to try and reduce that conflict a little bit. And also to taking action to require the provision of audible and visible information on board local services across Great Britain. Something that I think will be quite a significant change and really quite an improvement for many people travelling by bus. But BSIPs are also really important for accessibility. They provide an opportunity to think about bus service provision and accessibility in a holistic way. Accessibility shouldn't just be about tacking on a ramp or something like that. It should be in the very DNA of the design of bus services. When thinking about routes, for instance, thinking about where do those routes go from and to, are they connecting people with the places where they want to go? Are bus stops close to railway stations, hospitals, workplaces? If you can get that right for disabled people, then you're getting it right for everybody and making those services much easier to use and much more attractive. It's the same too. I'm always the one who gets guillotined. It's not fair. One more example is in the provision of information. If you can provide information that is accessible to disabled people and also talks of the accessibility of services, giving them confidence to travel, then that information is also going to work for everybody. It's going to help them to access services and make them want to use them. I think the bottom line here, and again, it's something that Michael mentioned, was that BSIPs need to be drawn up in consultation with local people. That's vitally important, as is ensuring that within that group of local people, the voice of disabled people is being heard loud and clear. And this shouldn't be a one-off. It should be an ongoing dialogue. It should be a conversation. Getting the BSIP right is just the first step. Ensuring that it remains relevant and that services continue to be informed by the evolving needs of disabled people is really, really important. And I think that the operators are really key to making that happen, ensuring that their experience, the passengers who use their services, inform the decisions that local authorities are taking, or that they're taking with local authorities, ensuring that the overall service works for everyone. So thanks very much for attending today to hear about this. I hope this has been helpful, and thanks very much.
Thanks, Robert. And I think that's the really interesting point that you finished with there, is this co-production partnership point. You know, the National Bus Strategy has set out that operators and local transport authorities need to work together. Well, also we need customers to work with those people as well, and disabled people, as Graham Vidler said, need to be placed front and centre of all of those conversations. So I know we've had some questions submitted before the session today. So if those of the presenters are available still to speak, Claire will do her best, Jeremy Paxman, with you all, and get some of those questions asked. So over to you. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Dawn. Okay, thanks everybody for all the various speeches. Now, I'm aware we have some local authority representatives on the call today, so I just wanted to bring up one that we dealt with a little bit yesterday, which was about local authorities apparently not giving disabled free travel passes to people with non-visible disabilities. So we took this to get some advice, and actually everybody who's registered disabled, regardless of whether you can see the disability, has a right to ask for a free travel pass. So it was conflated with an issue about travelling before 9:30, which I think most local authorities and operators will know that's an optional extra, which local authorities can do or not. But we are going to have a link to the guidance on this issue available after the event if anybody wants that clarified. I have a question. I know I've only just told you to stop talking, Robert, but it's actually possibly Michael who might need to answer this one. We've talked a lot in these sessions about the design of buses, and particularly in terms of the number of wheelchair spaces. And one of the questions that was asked was whether or not local authorities could in fact require more accessible space on buses as part of the BUSIP contract, part of the tender document. How do you feel about answering that one?
One of the things that we clearly want to happen is for operators to think and for authorities to think quite innovatively about how they can address accessibility challenges. One of the key challenges is clearly the pressure on space on board buses, and I think that we certainly want them to in those documents to explore different options for doing that. Different operators have added additional space to vehicles when doing that, I mean, Michael may be able to comment more on the specifics of what can be done within enhanced partnership or franchising arrangements, but I think, you know, the underlying message is to really be to think ambitiously about what you can do, and for authorities and operators to work together to come up with an outcome that really works for disabled people.
Okay, thank you very much. It's not quite as clear cut as one would like it to be, but I suppose you can't put the hammer down too hard when you haven't got much time to organise a change. But I do think operators need to start looking at the flexibility of the seating in new vehicles that they're commissioning, to make sure that there are better ways of dealing with the requirements of passengers thereon. It was also talked about wheelchairs, and I know you're reviewing the guidance on this, about wheelchairs getting larger and longer, as with mobility scooters. So that needs to be taken into account, and you know that we're going to be talking more about that in due course, Robert. So, okay, maybe I could ask Victoria to step in for a moment. One of the questions that we have been asked is about bus operators and who's doing what in terms of the better design for people with autism that are using the buses. And I wondered whether or not that was something to do with you. And yes, I think we all know that disability is not just a wheelchair space. So I think it's important to be looking at other conditions and how those can be ameliorated?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely brilliant question as always, Claire, and thank you so much for having us here today. So as you know, we do a lot of work, and in fact, the document that I dropped into the chat earlier on at the beginning, there's a section at the end in regards to Grace Air, but Grace Air is not the only organisation we work with. We just use that as an example, but it's a really good example of all the other organisations we work with, like Speak Out, St John's, and I could go on and on and on and on. And we do a thing called Drama on the Bus. We do lots of engagement. This is just one part, so it's not the only engagement. And actually looking at the design around autism is something within that, because of course with Grace Air we do the Drama on the Bus. It's not just an opportunity for us to feed back to bus users how we can help your travelling experience be much better. It's that listening and learning opportunity. And actually our driver trainers are on these sessions as well. So not only is it going directly into management level and into director level, it's actually going into the training department too. And then they're listening and learning, and engineering, so the head of engineering, Neil Miles, and also Steve Ambry, our engineering director, get involved in these things as well, and actually meet with people. So yes, we are looking at those things. And I'll give you a very quick example, Don. I know we don't have much time, but one particular lady who is in her 40s, living with autism, and she gives me permission to talk about this. She was having trouble with the audio-visual buses, because actually audio-visual buses, they're great, they work for so many people, but actually just like everything, not everything works for everyone, which is why choice is key. It was hurting, it was causing a difficulty around her autism travelling on the bus. She needed to get to work, she needed to pick her daughter up from school and take her to school. She's, Victoria, I can't travel on the bus, I need the drivers to turn it down. Drivers couldn't turn it down because it's helping other people. So we have a community support fund, and through the community support fund, we funded sonic earplugs for her that were all tested. She now travels on the bus with the sonic earplugs on. She's been travelling, and every month she's in contact with me saying, I'm back getting my bus pass again. And that goes back, not only is it delight, and there's a passenger for you that's travelling and actually using the bus well, but actually works for that commercial viability, that loop, because we've done it for the right reasons. But actually we've got a passenger that's coming back and buying tickets. But yes, very good question. I'm sorry that I sort of dragged it on a little bit. My apologies.
Don't worry, thank you. It just shows my age that when I hear the term sonic, I think hedgehogs. But anyway, we won't go too much into that. We were hoping we might be able to get somebody here from CPT at the end of this call to talk about the various questions that have come up. We've had some discussion in other sessions, and I think it's important for this audience to know that quite a lot of people are interested in apps, app developers working with operators to find a way of having an app that allows the driver for the service that they want to know that there's somebody ahead who either can't see them or can't wave to them or whatever. And they wanted to know that people would be interested. And actually the feedback that we've been having suggests that there are operators out there who are interested. And I wondered whether or not CPT could set up a working group so that those of you who can all work down similar lines rather than developing 16 different apps. One of the feedbacks we got from somebody who was particularly interested in this as a passenger was talking about the tendency to look at a single bus stop serving a single service. A lot of S's in that, apologies. Whereas actually what we also need is to have an app that works for somebody at a stop who wants to identify a single service at a multi-stopping shelter so that they only talk to the right driver or signal the right driver. There was an issue of data, which he's come up with quite a sneaky workaround for. So I think if there are people who are interested in working together to come up with something that would solve this problem for a lot of people, could I ask you to let us know after by the emails that you had, events@bususers.org, and then we'll see if we can get CPT to set you up with a working group to work on this issue. And it's CPT's fault that they're not here, that I've given them homework, so what can you do? Okay, I've got one last question to ask, and I'm afraid, Robert, this one's coming back to you. We've had some questions about it being hard to find tactile bus route information. mean, frankly, it's hard to find printed information on anything half the time these days, apart from singular excellent practitioners of that art. But we're being asked about tactile and braille maps for people with visual impairments. Now, the person who's been working hard on this says that he's been told that the Equalities Act gives an exemption for maps. Now, is that true? And if so, how does that square up with the public equality duty?
That's a bit of a new one for me. I'm not aware of the Equality Act mentioning maps anywhere, but I couldn't say for certain. It would seem to me that there's probably a difference between what has to be done and what's the right thing to do for disabled people. And I think if there is a real demand for tactile maps and information in Braille, noting that it can be fiendishly difficult, I think, to translate that kind of information into a sort of concise format in a tactile form. I think others have tried in the past, but if there is a demand for that, then certainly local authorities and operators should be listening to that. That clearly visually impaired people rely on bus services extremely heavily, and I think I think the bottom line is listen to your customers, and if that's what they're asking for, then look at how you can provide it. It shouldn't have to come down to what the law does or doesn't require.
Okay, that's a very good civil service answer. Thank you very much. Okay, let me just thank you, Robert. I'll let you off the hook now. You can relax.
Thank you.
I just round up a few points that seem to have been made across the all three events that we've had. I think it's very clear we expect and need operators and local authorities to keep talking to disabled people, not just when there's a policy issue or a problem or a change in sight, but regularly. I also think that it's clear that we all think that bus service improvement plans are a massive opportunity to get things better for people with disabilities of varying kinds. And if we miss that opportunity, it would be, frankly, a tragic loss. I think everybody's pretty much underlined the fact that equality of access is not an optional extra. It's a legal requirement and a public duty. So co-production of new policies, new products, it's key. And as disabled people, we need to make our voices heard. And if you're out there, bus company MDs and directors and senior staff, it's on you to listen, learn, understand, and then take action, please. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Dawn.
Thank you, Claire. That was a really great roundup of the last 3 days and the discussions we've been having. Just on the point of the question that you shared with Robert there about Braille, we do have a location for that particular person, and we have contacts with both operators and that particular local transport authority. So hopefully we'll be able to find a solution for that individual in particular. But just to finish up, thank you to everybody who's attended and taken part, and that's not just for today, the last 2 days. Thank you to all the speakers and presenters. You've all been fabulous and worked with the technology and been very honest in your answers. If you feel like there's anything that hasn't been addressed today and you'd really like to find out more or have a bigger conversation, then please do email bus users, because this won't be the last of these events. We have decided with Disability Rights UK that we will continue to do this work and continue to raise the issues that we've been learning more and more about over the last 2 days. So there will be information sent out to you about what's been discussed, and hopefully we'll have a video of today that has recorded correctly, which again we'll share with you as well. So thank you to everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.